Just after 1 a.m. on the East Coast, in the United States Supreme Court just issued an emergency ruling. An emergency stay just issued blocking the Trump regime from sending a group of Venezuelan migrants currently being housed at the Blue Bonnet Detention Center in Texas to the concentration camps in El Salvador until such time as there's further briefing on the right of these migrants to have habeas corpus proceedings. Here's what went down. So the ACLU is representing this group of migrants. The Trump regime indicated that it would be sending this next wave of Venezuelan migrants to the El Salvador extermination camps. The ACLU filed in the Washington, D.C. federal court before Judge Boasberg. They were trying to seek class action relief on behalf of all of those migrants. Judge Boasberg said, while the United States Supreme Court did indeed put forward a process, at least where habeas corpus motions for a due process adjudication of the claims on an individual basis were allowed, Boasberg said, the Supreme Court said, I don't have jurisdiction, and as much as I'm concerned with what the Trump regime's doing, there's nothing that I can do. So they struck out the ACLU in trying to get Judge Boasberg, Washington, D.C. federal judge, to issue a stay to block the migrants from being transferred to the concentration camps in El Salvador. Now, separately, the ACLU filed, because Blue Bonnet ICE Detention Center is in Texas, ACLU also brought action in federal court in Texas. That case was assigned to a federal judge who was actually a Trump appointee named Judge Wes Hendricks. On procedural grounds, Judge Wes Hendricks in the Northern District of Texas said, there's really nothing I can do because you've already issued or filed an appeal before the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal, so I'm divested of jurisdiction to hear your application. And in any event, the Trump regime claims that they're not going to send these migrants to El Salvador. So there really is an emergency if the Trump regime's giving us their word. that they're not going to send the migrants to El Salvador, to which ACLU said, come on, Judge. Come on, Judge Hendricks. We can't trust what the Trump regime is saying. That's what they did last time. They lie and then they send people. You got to issue an order. Judge Hendricks said, I'm not issuing an order. So the ACLU goes to basically Judge Hendricks' boss. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals says, hey, Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, Judge Hendricks not issuing the order. Washington, D.C. federal court not issuing the order. Yes, the Trump regime is saying that they're not going to send these migrants until they get a habeas corpus proceeding, unless there's some due process. We don't trust them. You got to issue an order, Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, because this may go down immediately. They may be sent to the concentration camps. What did the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals do? Nothing. They didn't respond. They basically ignored it and didn't address it on an emergency basis. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal, it should be noted, is a very right-wing court of appeal. I think everybody is a Trumper or a George W. Bush appointee, all right-wing justices. So this is why the Trump regime wants to try to get all of the jurisdiction for these migrants in Texas, because they think they get better judges there than judges in other areas in the country. So when the Fifth Circuit doesn't do anything, what happens? The ACLU then files an emergency application to the United States Supreme Court saying, Supreme Court, we tried in D.C., they said no jurisdiction. Judge Boasberg said no jurisdiction. Hey, Supreme Court, Judge Hendricks says he can't do anything. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal isn't responding. This can be imminent. We need you to do something. So the ACLU files with the Supreme Court, and then at 1 a.m. on Saturday, the Supreme Court responds. Let me read for you the order by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says the following. In the case of AARP et al. V. Trump, President of the United States et al., there is before the court an application on behalf of a putative class of detainees seeking an injunction against their removal under the Alien Enemies Act. The matter is currently pending before the Fifth Circuit. Upon action by the Fifth Circuit, the Solicitor General is invited to file a response to the application before this court as soon as possible. The government is directed not to remove any member of the putative class of detainees from the United States until further order of this court. Justice Thomas and Justice Alito dissent from the court's order. Statement from Justice Alito to follow. And as of this recording, I don't have Justice Alito's statement yet, but that means of the 9 justices, it appears 7 justices agreed with this injunctive relief, this stay for now, at least emergency stay. Do not send these detainees until you hear from us. We need to hear what the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals is going to do. They haven't responded. Justice Thomas and Justice Alito, in a very scary way, they would allow these migrants to be sent to El Salvador.